Now we're going to clean the polyfilter, replace the polyfilter here, because at this stage the tank is very cloudy, and that could be that the sand was dirtier than normal. So it's always safer to wash your sand, but I've been advised that the sand has been recently fairly clean, which may or may not be the case. The other thing is that we did dip these rocks in a bucket of salt water, but there was a lot of sediment on these rocks. So I did notice when I was pouring the water in that a lot of sediment was coming off the rocks. So the water is either cloudy due to a bit of sediment in the sand, or it could be that there was still excess sediment on the rock. But either way, I'm expecting that to clear up very quickly once we get the filters running. But I do want to make sure that we have proper polyfilter in the filter, because if it is nutrients, or if it is sediment from the rocks themselves, it is possible there's bad gases, because there's certainly been some pretty funky smells coming off this tank. So the filter is now running, and we'll get the skimmer cleaned, and we'll see how quickly this tank clears up before we get all the other pumps and so forth activated. It's also really important that you check that your weir is clear, because quite often there'll be a whole lot of crap down the bottom of the weir, which is not the case here at the moment. Now this tank's got a dosing system on it, and it's important you get in the habit of every time you round your fish tank, you want to get in the habit of giving all of your bottles a little bit of a shake. Give it a little shake, and then also that make sure that you know that there's liquid in the bottle, because over time the bottle will get empty, and you've got to know where to replace it. There's no point having a dosing system if it's not dosing anything, which is unbelievably common. I'll come to people's houses and they've got a dosing system. The dosing system's doing nothing because the dosing system is empty.
Now, other things to just be aware of around saltwater aquariums is there was a bit of steel here, some sort of bracing, and that was in the bottom of the fish tank. So that sort of thing is not ideal. So what we need to do is clean up and maybe put a glass lid there, because there's rusted old steel here. And the steel being in the bottom of the tank is not an ideal situation, because steel can have various toxins in the steel, which can be an issue. And that's why irregularly running polyfilter is a very good idea, because you might find the colour show up in the polyfilter. That may or may not happen. And then also sending away an ICP test every now and then is not a bad idea, because particularly if you're having trouble with your aquarium, if you send away an ICP test and it finds some strange steel in it, and then you find that that's fallen in the tank, and that could explain issues you may be having as well.
So we've set this chiller now for 27, and there's a heater in the aquarium that we have set on 25. So therefore, if the tank goes below 25, the heater should come on, and if the tank goes above 27, the chiller should come on, and that means they shouldn't be running at once. If you ever look at your tank and you see the light on your heater on, and you hear your chiller on, then that's not so good. You want to change the settings to turn your heater typically down, and turn your chiller up. So therefore there's more space in between them, because they will be thermostated, but they're not run on the same thermostat. So therefore, even though you set them for the right degrees, it doesn't mean they're necessarily going to be the right degrees.
If you have an aquarium, you definitely want one of these. These are called flippers, and they do a great job, and they make your life very easy. This is a must. Just don't go ramming into the silicon. And whenever you're checking out old tanks too, it's really important that you look at the silicon and you make sure it's a consistent colour. Because if you look along the silicon and you start seeing it delaminating, you'll find that a part of the silicon will be lighter and another part will be darker. I'm not seeing a problem here, but this is a very old tank, so we'll let go one day. Generally, keeping it in the same position is the safest thing you can do. Generally, with an old tank like this, if you move it, that's when you're likely to have a problem with delamination, because it's sitting here completely flat, and then even if it's not microscopically flat, if you put it in another spot and it's slightly different, because the silicon is so old, there'd be no give in the silicon. It'd be very brittle and it will let go very easy. So relocating an aquarium over 10 years old is absolutely risky, because depending on the quality of silicon and depending on the quality of the build, then the silicon will fail one day.
So after cleaning a skimmer, the main thing you're cleaning is the inside of that neck. And now I've just turned the skimmer back on again, and after a big service like this, a major overhaul, it's quite normal for the skimmer just to go nuts for a while, so just get prepared for that. Now as the froth starts to change colour, we want the yellow froth coming out and the white froth staying in. And we need that sump level to be stable in order for this to be stable. And that's why we want to set up a dosing system here, so that water can stay stable, so the skimmer can remain stable. And you can set it and not have it change with evaporation, therefore stop working.
Now the water is starting to clear up. Now one thing that I am a big fan of is having a quarantine tank. Now one thing that we could consider doing here is we've got enough room here to potentially put a quarantine tank. What that would allow us to do is quarantine any new fish when we're repopulating the aquarium, which reduces the chance of any disease going into the tank. So we could actually look at using this area to be a quarantine tank, which can also be a top-up system. So obviously we cannot be able to run both at the same time, but currently this tank doesn't have a quarantine tank or a top-up system. So therefore, if we were utilizing this space, we could actually set up a top-up system that can dub as a quarantine tank when we're adding new fish. The other thing that we could consider doing here too is adding a UV sterilizer. Now the reason why I would consider adding a UV sterilizer is if we end up getting a fair bit of money's worth of fish in this tank, the UV sterilizer will reduce the chance of pathogens, because pathogens are something that you risk putting into the aquarium every time you put new fish in. So steps like pre-quarantining the tank would be the first bit of advice, and then considering a UV on the tank to offer protection to your fish once the fish go into the tank. Means that we're now starting to address biosecurity concerns and not just living in hope. A hope that we don't introduce a fish that can put disease into the rest of the fish.
So the levels of this tank have tested up very well. KH is 8.5, which is good. pH is 8.1, which is good. There's a tiny bit of phosphate, which is expected. Calcium is good. Magnesium is good. Ammonium nitrite and nitrate is all good. So those levels are good. And now, what was the temperature you said? Now? Yeah. It's 21. 21.3, and the salt is 2.4. Okay, and then what did you say the drum was? The drum is 20.3. Right. The salt is 2.5. Right, so the temperature is going up 1 degree when we're going into the main tank, and the salt level is going down 1 degree. So I'm very happy with that. Because you want to try to introduce fish into lower salinity, and if possible you want to introduce fish into higher temperature, but only slightly, like 1 degree. The water tests out good now, and the water is clearly starting to clear up. Now what we've got to keep an eye on is the water coming down here. So we want to keep sort of making sure there's fresh wool underneath the water coming in, because I don't want that clogging up if possible. Keep an eye on the skimmer, make sure the skimmer is at the right level, and then keeping an eye on the water level, make sure that all that looks fine. But now we'll just give this tank a little bit of time and let the tank stabilise up, and away we go. So we'll just keep an eye on this guy. Definitely worried about him because of his age, but he's looking fine. And the coral beauties in there bouncing around somewhere while we're waiting for the water to clear up. And this polyfilter in the water, I would never let it be like this without polyfilter. But for now we're just waiting for this to clear. He's looking okay.